Part 1. The sky above the moon was black and empty like it always was. No wind, no clouds, just stars and silence. But that silence was about to break. Far out past Mars something was coming. It moved slow at first, then faster like a shadow growing teeth. The Cathari had arrived. They were not like humans. Tall, gray-skinned, with eyes like polished stone. They had spent centuries crushing every species that stood in their way. Their ships were huge, bigger than cities, and built to last. Their hulls were layered with gravitic shields and alloys so strong that lasers bounced off them like raindrops. They believed nothing in the galaxy could hurt them, especially not a young species like humanity, still learning to walk among the stars. From the command deck of the lead dreadnought, Admiral Vorak watched Earth grow larger on his view screen. He did not smile, Cathari did not smile, but a cold satisfaction filled his chest. This world was soft. Its cities glowed like fireflies in the night, its defenses scattered and weak. His scouts had reported orbital stations, a few fighter patrols, and some strange metal platforms circling the planet. Nothing worth noting. He tapped a clawed finger on his armrest. "Send the message," he ordered. Across the Sol system, every human communication channel lit up at once. A deep, guttural voice spoke in broken but clear English. "You have 6 hours. Surrender your world, or be erased." On Luna Base Gamma, Lieutenant Kyle Dawson heard the message while drinking bad coffee from a dented mug. He didn't flinch. He just set the mug down and walked to the main observation window. Earth hung below, blue and fragile. He'd grown up in Colorado, fishing with his dad in mountain streams. He never thought he'd be the one standing between that world and annihilation. Behind him, Chief Engineer Lena Ruiz was already at her console, fingers flying over the screen. She was small, with dark hair pulled into a messy bun and grease smudged on her cheek. She didn't look like a hero, but she had built the thing that might save them all. "Thunderlance is online," she said without turning. "All 3 platforms report green." Kyle nodded. Project Thunderlance had been a joke at first. After the first alien scout ship showed up near Jupiter 5 years ago, just watching, never attacking, Earth's governments panicked. They poured money into weapons. Most were fancy, plasma beams, laser grids, drone swarms. But a few old-school engineers, including Lena's mentor, had whispered an old idea. What if they just threw something really, really fast? Railguns, simple, brutal, no explosives, no energy fields, just mass and speed. A chunk of metal, accelerated to a fraction of light speed, carried more energy than a nuclear bomb. The problem was no one believed it could work against advanced aliens. Their shields would stop it, they said. Their hulls were too strong. But Lena had spent 3 years proving them wrong. She'd run simulations, tested materials, and even convinced the military to let her build 3 orbital platforms in secret. Now those platforms, each the size of a football field, hung in space above Earth, loaded with slugs made of depleted uranium and tungsten. They were ugly, loud, and gloriously dumb, and right now they were all humanity had. Kyle walked over to her station. "You think it'll work?" Lena finally looked up. Her eyes were tired but sharp. "Physics doesn't care how fancy your ship is. If you hit something hard enough, it breaks." The Cathari just forgot that. Outside, the Cathari fleet formed up. Dozens of ships, sleek and black, moved into position like wolves circling prey. They weren't rushing. They didn't need to. To them, this was already over. Back on Earth, cities emptied. People huddled in bunkers or stared at the sky, waiting for fire to fall. In Houston, a young pilot named Marcus Bell sat in his ready room, helmet in hand. His squadron, 12 aerospace fighters, was Earth's last line of mobile defense. Their missiles wouldn't scratch a Cathari hull, but orders were orders. If the railguns failed, they'd fly anyway. Not to win. Just to show they wouldn't go down without a fight. On the moon, alarms began to blare. The Cathari had fired. 2 plasma lances, beams of superheated energy, lanced out from the front ships. They struck 2 old defense satellites near geosynchronous orbit. The satellites didn't explode. They simply vanished, turned to vapor in an instant. The light from the blasts reflected off the moon's surface, casting long, eerie shadows across Luna Base Gamma. Kyle's jaw tightened. "They're testing us, or showing off," Lena muttered. She pulled up a new screen. "Their shields are active, triple-layered, gravitic dampeners, quantum mesh, and some kind of harmonic buffer. Nasty. Can Thunderlance punch through?" She hesitated. "The simulations say maybe, but simulations aren't real life. We don't have real life left if we don't try. She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. Alpha platform is ready, targeting the lead dreadnought, the one with the big spike on top. That's Vorek's ship, Kyle gave the order. Fire when ready, Lena typed in the final command. A red light blinked once, then turned green. Somewhere high above Earth, massive capacitors discharged. Electromagnets roared to life. And a 120-ton slug of metal, cold and silent, shot into space at 9,000 kilometers per second. It took less than 3 seconds to cross the distance. The Cathari saw it coming. Their sensors picked up the launch, but they didn't react. Why would they? A solid projectile? Against their shields? It was like throwing a pebble at a mountain. The slug hit the outer shield. The shield flared bright blue, rippling like water. For a heartbeat it held. Then the slug kept going. It didn't explode. It didn't need to. Its speed alone carried the force of a small asteroid impact. The shield buckled. The slug tore through the second layer, then the third. It punched through the armored hull like it wasn't there, carving a tunnel through decks, engines, and crew quarters. Deep inside the ship, it struck the antimatter containment chamber. The explosion was silent in the vacuum, but bright enough to blind sensors across the system. The dreadnought broke apart in a storm of fire and debris. Chunks of metal spun wildly into the dark. Smaller ships nearby rocked from the shockwave. On the Cathari command ship, Vorek stood frozen. His claws dug into the armrests. Impossible, he whispered. On Luna Base Gamma, Kyle let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. Lena stared at her screen, eyes wide. It worked, she said, voice barely above a whisper. It actually worked. But Kyle wasn't celebrating. He watched the remaining Cathari ships shift formation. They weren't retreating. They were getting angry. They'll come harder now, he said. Lena wiped her hands on her jumpsuit. Then we'll hit them harder too. Outside, the stars watched. And for the first time in centuries, the Cathari felt something they had long forgotten. Fear. Part 2, Admiral Vorek stood in the center of his new command deck, claws clenched so tight they drew blood. His flagship, the Iron Maw, was now the lead ship of the Cathari fleet, and rage burned in his chest like a dying star. The humans had destroyed his brother's vessel with a single shot. Not with energy weapons, not with clever tricks, just a piece of metal thrown hard and fast. It was insulting. It was primitive. And worst of all, it worked. He turned to his war council, their faces grim under the dim red lighting. They rely on brute force, he growled. Then we will show them what true strength looks like. He ordered every ship to double their forward shield harmonics and reinforce their hulls with emergency grav plating. Close the distance. Crush their platforms before they fire again. The Cathari fleet moved as one. Black ships slid through the void like sharks, their engines humming with power. They formed a tight wedge, shields overlapping, armor thickened. They would not be caught off guard again. Their sensors now tracked every human orbital asset. The 3 railgun platforms, Alpha, Beta, and Gamma, were marked in red. Priority targets. On Luna Base Gamma, Kyle watched the fleet's new formation on the main screen. His coffee was cold again. They're not scared, he said quietly. They're mad. Lena stood beside him, arms crossed. She'd barely slept since the first shot. Her eyes were bloodshot, but her mind was sharp. Mad is good. Mad makes mistakes. They're reinforcing their fronts. Shields are stronger now. Hulls too. Then we aim for the weak spots, she said. Every ship has them. Even theirs. She pulled up a new schematic, data gathered from the wreckage of the first dreadnought. The slug had torn through cleanly, but the explosion started in the antimatter core, which sat just behind the bridge. That meant the rear shielding was lighter, and the joints between armor plates? Slightly weaker. Not by much. But enough. We can't hit the front head-on anymore, she said. But if Beta and Gamma fire at an angle, we can strike where their shields overlap. That's where the resonance is weakest. Kyle nodded. Tell Marcus to get his fighters ready. We'll need a distraction. Lena tapped her comm. Houston, this is Luna Gamma. Thunderlance, Beta, and Gamma prepare for synchronized fire. Target coordinates incoming. Down on Earth, in a bunker beneath the Texas plains, Marcus Bell heard the call. He was already suited up. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from adrenaline. He climbed into his fighter, a sleek aerospace craft called the Wasp. It carried missiles, lasers, and little else. Against Cathari ships, it was like bringing a knife to a cannon fight. But he didn't care. He had a job to do. "Squadron, form up," he said over the radio. "We're drawing their eyes. Fly fast, fly low, and don't die." 12 fighters launched from hidden silos across North America. They shot into the sky, breaking atmosphere in minutes. Marcus led them in a wide arc toward the approaching fleet. He didn't fire, not yet. He just flew, weaving between debris and old satellites, making himself impossible to ignore. The Cathari noticed immediately. Smaller ships peeled off to intercept. Plasma turrets swiveled toward the tiny human craft. Marcus grinned. "There you go," he whispered. He fired his first missile, not at a ship, but at empty space near a Cathari cruiser. The explosion created a flash of heat and light, enough to confuse their targeting systems for a few seconds. His wingman, a pilot named Jake, did the same on the other side. The Cathari ships turned, shields shifting to face this new nuisance. That was the moment Lena waited for. "Now," she said. Thunderlance Beta and Gamma fired at the same time. 2 slugs, each heavier than a locomotive, screamed into space. They didn't fly straight. They curved slightly, guided by magnetic rails and last-second trajectory tweaks. They struck the Cathari formation from the sides, hitting just behind the reinforced fronts. The first slug hit a command cruiser near its engine housing. The shields flared white-hot, then collapsed under the sheer kinetic pressure. The slug punched through 3 decks, shredded coolant lines, and buried itself in the reactor chamber. The ship didn't explode right away. It groaned, twisted, then split in half as internal pressure blew it apart. The second slug struck a carrier near its launch base. The impact tore open the hull like a tin can. Atmosphere rushed out, carrying debris and crew into the void. Fires bloomed inside, feeding on oxygen until there was none left. The carrier listed heavily, dead in space. On the Iron Maw, alarms blared. Vorak watched 2 of his best ships fall in less than 10 seconds. His calm was gone. "How?" he roared. "Their weapons are primitive. They are not aiming for strength," his science officer said, voice shaking. "They are aiming for balance. One hit disrupts the shield harmony. The next breaks it." Vorak slammed his fist into the console. "Then we stop them before they fire again." He ordered boarding pods launched toward the railgun platforms. Small, fast, and armored, they carried elite Cathari shock troops. If they could seize or destroy the platforms, the humans would be defenseless. Lena saw the pods on her screen. "Oh no," she muttered. "Kyle, we've got company." "How many?" 20, heading for Alpha and Beta. "We can't let them get close, and we won't." She switched channels. "Marcus, can you intercept?" Marcus was already turning his fighter. His squadron was down to 8 ships. 2 had been vaporized by plasma fire. Another was limping back to Earth, but he still had teeth. "On it," he said. His fighters dove toward the pods. Missiles streaked out, exploding near the Cathari craft. Most missed. The pods were small and fast, but a few hits damaged their thrusters. One pod spun out of control and crashed into another, both exploding in a silent fireball. But more kept coming. On Thunderlance Alpha, automated turrets opened fire. Railgun microslugs, smaller, faster rounds, ripped through space. They weren't strong enough to destroy a dreadnought, but they shredded boarding pods like paper. 3 more pods burst apart. Still 5 made it close. Lena's hands flew over the console. "I'm rerouting power from non-essential systems. Boosting point defense on Alpha." Kyle watched the battle unfold on the screen. His heart pounded. He knew what had to be done. "I'm going up there." Lena looked at him like he was crazy. "You're not a spacewalk tech. I'm the only one who knows the whole system. If something breaks during the next shot, you'll need someone up there to fix it fast," she wanted to argue. But she saw the look in his eyes. He wasn't asking. He was telling. "Fine," she said. "But you suit up in 10 minutes or I lock the bay." Kyle ran. 10 minutes later, he was in a maintenance shuttle, rocketing toward Thunderlance Alpha. The platform loomed ahead, huge, cold and scarred from near misses. He docked at the service port and stepped out into the void. His boots magnetized to the hull. Earth spun below, beautiful and unaware. He moved fast, checking capacitors, cooling lines, and rail alignment. Everything looked good. But then he saw it. A cracked power conduit near the main coil. One more shot might overload it. He opened his toolkit. "Lena, I found the weak spot. Gonna patch it now. Hurry, Vorak's fleet is regrouping. They're coming in tighter." Kyle worked with numb fingers. The cold of space seeped through his suit. Sweat stung his eyes. He spliced wires, sealed the crack with thermal putty, and rerouted a backup line from a dead sensor array. It wasn't perfect, but it would hold. Back on the Iron Maw, Vorik made his final decision. We end this now. He ordered all ships to converge on Earth's moon. If we cannot destroy their weapons, we will destroy their base. Crush Luna Gamma. Let them watch their last hope die. The fleet turned as one, engines flaring. They would ram the moon if they had to. But Kyle was already back inside the shuttle. Patch is done, he said over the comm. Alpha is ready. Lena took a deep breath. She looked at the screen. The Cathari were closing fast. She had one shot. Marcus, she said. Get clear. Copy that, he replied, voice tired but steady. His fighters pulled back, leaving the void empty. Lena input the final firing sequence. All three platforms, Alpha, Beta, and Gamma, charged their rails. Capacitors hummed. Magnets whined. And in the silence between heartbeats, humanity held its breath. Then the slugs flew. Art 3. The three railgun slugs left their platforms in perfect silence. No roar, no flash, just sudden absence where mass had been. They flew in a tight triangle, aimed not at the front of the Cathari fleet, but just ahead of it. Lena had calculated the lead. She knew the enemy would keep moving forward, right into the path of destruction. On the bridge of the Iron Maw, Admiral Vorik saw the launch. This time he did not ignore it. Brace shields, he ordered. Full reinforcement on forward sectors. Every ship in the fleet poured extra power into their front shields. Hull plates locked tighter. Internal dampeners engaged. They were ready. Or so they thought. The first slug struck the lead destroyer. Its shield flared blue, then white, then cracked like glass. The slug did not stop. It tore through the hull, shearing off the ship's nose and exploding out the back in a spray of molten metal. The destroyer spun wildly, dead before it knew it was hit. The second slug hit a support cruiser just behind it. This time the shield held for a full second, long enough for the Cathari crew to believe they had survived. Then the kinetic energy overloaded the harmonic buffer. The shield collapsed inward, and the slug punched through the bridge, killing the captain and his entire command staff in an instant. The third slug was the heaviest. It flew straight for the Iron Maw. Vorik watched it come, eyes wide. He ordered emergency evasive thrust, but the dreadnought was too massive to turn quickly. The slug struck the lower port side where the armor was thinnest. It did not penetrate the core, but it ripped open 3 decks, destroyed 2 engine clusters, and sent shockwaves through the entire ship. Lights flickered. Alarms screamed. For the first time, the Iron Maw bled. Vorik staggered to his feet. His pride was wounded more than his ship. They dare, he hissed. They dare strike my vessel with a rock! His science officer rushed to his side. Admiral, our shield matrix is failing. The repeated impacts are causing resonance decay. Another hit like that and our defenses will collapse. Vorik's claws dug into the railing. He looked at the human world below, so small and fragile. Yet it kept hitting back, harder each time. Then we do not give them another shot, he said. We go to the source. He gave a new order. All remaining ships were to ignore the railgun platforms. Instead, they would target Luna Base Gamma directly. If they destroyed the command center, the platforms would go blind. No targeting, no coordination, just dumb metal in space. The fleet shifted again. Smaller ships formed a protective shell around the larger ones. They fired covering plasma bursts to blind human sensors. Then they accelerated toward the moon. On Luna Base Gamma, Lena saw the change in their course. They're coming for us, she said. Kyle had just returned from his spacewalk, still in his suit. He pulled off his helmet, breathing hard. How long? 10 minutes. Maybe less. We can't let them land. We won't have to. They won't get close, she tapped her console. Marcus, you still out there? A crackle came over the comm. Barely, down to 5 birds. But we're here. Good. I need you to do something crazy. I'm listening. Fly straight at them. Not to attack. Just get in their way. Make them waste shots on you. Buy me time to line up one last volley. There was a pause. Then Marcus laughed, a tired, rough sound. You got it, Chief. Tell my mom I loved her coffee. He turned his fighter toward the oncoming fleet. His remaining pilots followed without question. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and out of luck. But they flew anyway. The Cathari opened fire. Plasma lances cut through space, turning 2 fighters to ash in seconds. Marcus dodged, rolled, and fired chaff to confuse their targeting. He flew so close to a destroyer that he could see the seams in its hull. He didn't fire his weapons. He just flew. Fast, erratic, impossible to ignore. The Cathari ships turned to track him. Their formation wobbled. Shields shifted to face this new threat. It was exactly what Lena needed. She worked fast. Her fingers danced across the screen, adjusting aim, syncing timing, rerouting power from life support and lighting to the railgun capacitors. She didn't care about comfort now, only fire. Kyle stood behind her, watching the battle unfold on the main screen. He saw Marcus's fighter take a glancing hit. Smoke trailed from the wing, but the craft kept flying. "He's buying us seconds," Kyle said. "Seconds are all we need," Lena replied. She locked the final targeting solution. The 3 platforms were ready again. But this time she wasn't firing at ships. She was firing at the path ahead of them. She wanted to force the Cathari to break formation or fly into a wall of tungsten. "Firing," she said. The slugs launched. They struck empty space, but not for long. The Cathari fleet plowed right into the impact zone. One slug ripped through a frigate's midsection. Another shattered the wing of a heavy cruiser, sending it spinning into its neighbor. The third missed its target but exploded a fuel pod, creating a fireball that blinded sensors for precious moments. The fleet scattered. Vorak roared in fury. His perfect formation was broken. His ships were damaged. His pride was in ruins. And still, the humans fired. On the moon, Lena slumped in her chair. "That's all we've got for now. Capacitors need 10 minutes to recharge." Kyle looked at the screen. The Cathari were regrouping, but slower now. Confused. Angry. 10 minutes is a lifetime in a fight like this. Down in Earth's atmosphere, Marcus's fighter sputtered. His engine was failing. He'd taken too many hits. He knew he wouldn't make it back. But he also knew he'd done his part. He keyed his comm one last time. "Luna Gamma, tell them we held the line." Then his fighter went dark, tumbling toward the upper atmosphere, where it would burn up like a falling star. Back on the Iron Maw, Vorak made a decision. He would not retreat. Not after this. But he would not charge blindly either. He ordered his fleet to hold position. "Deploy gravity mines," he said, "and launch the boarding pods again. This time aim for the platform's control nodes." The Cathari released dozens of small dark spheres into space. Gravity mines. They warped local space, creating pockets of crushing force. Any ship or slug that passed too close would be torn apart. They also launched a new wave of boarding pods, faster and smarter than before. Lena saw the mines appear on her screen. "Oh no," she whispered. "They're trying to block our shots." Kyle leaned in. "Can we shoot around them?" "Not easily. The mines shift position." "They're alive," she thought fast. Then her eyes lit up. "But they're not smart enough to dodge." She pulled up a new program, something she'd written as a backup. "I can use the microslugs from the point defense guns to trigger the mines early. Clear a path. It'll take time. We don't have time. But we have no choice." She started the sequence. Tiny rounds fired from the platform, zipping toward the mines. One by one, the mines activated, collapsing in on themselves in harmless bursts of distorted space. A narrow corridor opened between them. "It's ready," she said, but only for a few seconds. Kyle looked at her. "Then we make those seconds count." He keyed the comm to all platforms. "This is Lieutenant Dawson. All stations prepare for final fire. Target the Iron Maw. Aim for the bridge." Lena input the coordinates. Her hands were steady now. She knew this might be the last shot humanity ever fired. Outside, the stars waited. The moon held its breath. And the Cathari fleet, proud and ancient, faced a species that refused to kneel. The capacitors hummed to full charge. The rails glowed hot. And somewhere deep in the void, physics prepared to settle the score. Piero 4. The Cathari boarding pods streaked toward the railgun platforms like angry wasps. Small, fast, and packed with elite shock troops, they carried plasma cutters and grav lances meant to slice through human metal like butter. Their mission was simple: seize control of Thunderlance Alpha, Beta, and Gamma, or destroy them from the inside. Without those platforms, Earth would be defenseless. On Luna Base Gamma, Lena watched the pods close in on her screen. Her fingers flew across the console, launching countermeasures. Drone interceptors shot out from hidden bays on each platform, firing micro-slugs in tight bursts. 2 pods exploded before they got close. A third spun away, damaged but still moving. We can't stop them all, Kyle said, standing beside her. His voice was calm, but his knuckles were white. I know, Lena replied. But we don't have to stop them. We just have to keep the platforms firing long enough. She switched channels. All platform crews lock down internal hatches. Activate emergency protocols. If they get inside, seal off sections one by one. There were no human crews on the platforms, just maintenance bots and remote systems. But the protocols would slow the Cathari down. Every second counted. Outside, the gravity mines floated like silent traps. Lena had cleared a narrow path through them, but it was shrinking. The mines were drifting back, pulled by the mass of the Cathari ships. She had maybe 30 seconds before the corridor closed. Capacitors at 90%, she said. 95, 98. The Iron Maw loomed ahead, its scarred hull glowing from internal fires. Admiral Vorak stood on the bridge, eyes fixed on the human platforms. He could see the energy building in their rails. He knew what was coming. Raise aft shields, he ordered. Divert all power from weapons. It was a gamble. Without forward weapons, his fleet couldn't fire, but if he saved his ship, he could still win. The capacitors hit 100%. Fire, Lena said. 3 slugs launched in perfect unison. They shot through the cleared path, just as the last mine drifted into place. The corridor vanished behind them. The Cathari saw the slugs coming. This time they were ready. The Iron Maw's rear shields flared to life. Thicker, denser, reinforced with emergency grav fields. The first slug struck the shield and stopped dead. It didn't punch through. It just hung there for a split second, glowing white-hot before exploding into vapor. Lena's heart sank. No, but the second slug hit a fraction of a second later. The shield was already weakened from the first impact. It buckled. The slug tore through the outer layer and buried itself in the engine housing. Metal screamed. Plasma lines ruptured. The Iron Maw shuddered like a wounded beast. The third slug never reached its target. A boarding pod, damaged but still functional, had latched onto Thunderlance Gamma. Its troops had already cut through the outer hull and were inside the control node. In their final act, they overloaded the platform's targeting system. The third slug veered off course, missing the Iron Maw by kilometers and vanishing into deep space. On the bridge, Vorak let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. His ship was hurt but not dead, and the humans had wasted their best shot. Finish them, he ordered. The Cathari fleet surged forward again. Plasma fire lit up the void. More boarding pods launched. Gravity mines shifted to block any future shots. It looked like the end, but Kyle wasn't watching the fleet. He was watching the data stream from Thunder Lance Alpha. Lena, he said slowly. The first slug didn't just hit the shield. It overloaded their harmonic buffer. Look at the energy readings. Lena pulled up the sensor logs. Her eyes widened. You're right. Their rear shield matrix is unstable. One more solid hit and it'll collapse completely. But Gamma's targeting is gone, Kyle said. We only have Alpha and Beta left. And their capacitors are drained, Lena added. They need time to recharge. How much? 8 minutes. Kyle looked at the screen. The Cathari would be on top of Luna Base in 6. We don't have 8 minutes, he said. Lena bit her lip. Then her eyes lit up. Unless we cheat. She turned to her console and started typing fast. The platforms share a power grid through lunar relay stations. If I reroute everything, life support, comms, even the base lights, I can dump emergency power into Alpha and Beta. Give them one more shot. But it'll take everything we've got, and if it fails, then we're out of tricks, Kyle nodded. Do it! Lena's fingers flew. Lights in the base dimmed. Air recyclers slowed. The hum of machinery dropped to a whisper. All power flowed upward into the rails orbiting high above. On the Iron Maw, Vorak gave his final order. Ram the moon, crush their base. Let them die watching their home burn. The dreadnought turned, engines flaring. It would take a direct hit to destroy Luna Base Gamma. But Vorak didn't care. He would bury humanity in rock and silence down on Earth. People watched in horror as the massive ship turned toward the moon. In Houston, in Beijing and Nairobi, millions held their breath. But on Luna Base Gamma, Lena was ready, capacitors charging, she said. 50%, 70, 90. The Cathari boarding pods reached Thunderlance Alpha. Explosions flashed on the hull as the aliens cut their way in. But Lena didn't stop. She kept feeding power. 100%, she said. Fire, Kyle ordered. Alpha and Beta fired together. Two slugs, the last humanity had, shot into space. They didn't aim for the Iron Maw's rear this time. Lena had adjusted the angle. She aimed for the spot where the damaged engine housing met the main hull, the weakest point. The slugs struck in rapid succession. The first hit the scar left by the earlier shot. The unstable rear shield flickered and died. The slug punched through armor, tore through crew quarters, and ripped into the antimatter containment chamber. The second slug followed right behind it, diving into the same hole like a bullet through an open door. It struck the core directly. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the Iron Maw exploded. The blast was silent but blinding. Fire and metal filled the void. Smaller Cathari ships nearby were thrown off course by the shockwave. Debris rained across the lunar surface. On the bridge of what was left of the flagship, Vorik had no time to speak. No time to rage. He simply ceased to be. On Luna Base Gamma, alarms blared from the power drain. The lights went out completely. Only the emergency red glow remained. Lena slumped in her chair, exhausted. Did we get him? Kyle looked at the screen. The Iron Maw was gone. Only wreckage floated where it had been. Yeah, he said softly. We got him, but the battle wasn't over. The remaining Cathari ships were still out there. Leaderless, yes, but not harmless, and Thunder Lance had no more shots left. Part 5. The void around the moon was quiet for the first time in hours. Wreckage from the Iron Maw drifted in slow motion, glowing faintly from the heat of its death. Smaller Cathari ships floated nearby, their lights flickering, their crews stunned. Without Vorik, without orders, they did not know what to do. For an empire built on absolute command, silence was more terrifying than fire. On Luna Base Gamma, the red emergency lights cast long shadows. The air was warm, too warm, because the cooling systems were off. Kyle stood at the main window watching the alien fleet. They were not attacking, not retreating either, just waiting. Like they had forgotten how to move. Lena sat at her console, her head in her hands. All power was gone from the railgun platforms. No shots left. No tricks left. If the Cathari came again, humanity had nothing. But then something strange happened. One Cathari frigate turned its engines away from Earth. Then another. A cruiser powered down its weapons. Within minutes, the entire fleet began to pull back, forming a loose cluster near the edge of lunar orbit. They were not fleeing in panic. They were withdrawing with purpose. With shame, Kyle frowned. What are they doing? Lena pulled up a weak signal from a Cathari comm channel, broken but clear enough. She played it through the speakers. A voice, rough and tired, spoke in their guttural tongue. A translation program spat out rough English. The apes threw stones and broke our sky. She looked at Kyle. They're leaving. Why? Because they lost, she said simply. Not just ships. Not just their admiral. They lost their belief. They thought nothing could hurt them. Now they know better. Outside, the Cathari fleet turned as one and fired their engines. They moved slowly at first, then faster. Vanishing into the dark between Mars and Jupiter. They did not look back. On Earth, people began to cheer. In cities, in bunkers, in farms and forests, strangers hugged and cried. The sky was safe again. The nightmare was over. But on the moon, there was no celebration. Only exhaustion. Kyle walked over to the coffee machine. It was dead. He tapped it anyway, nothing. He smiled faintly. Guess we earned a real cup when we get home. Lena stood up, stretching her stiff arms. If there's any coffee left on Earth. They both laughed, a quiet, tired sound. Not the laugh of victors, but of people who had stared into the end and blinked first. Down in Earth's atmosphere, Marcus Bell's name was added to the memorial wall in Houston. His mother placed a single photo at the base, him as a boy holding a toy plane. She didn't cry. She just whispered, "You flew straight, son." Back on Luna Base, repairs began. Solar panels were realigned. Power slowly returned. The railgun platforms, though empty, still floated in their orbits, silent guardians made of steel and stubbornness. Days passed. Ships from Earth came to collect the wounded, bring supplies, and survey the damage. Scientists studied the Cathari wreckage. Engineers took notes on alien alloys. Politicians gave speeches about unity and courage. But Kyle and Lena stayed out of it. They spent their time watching Earth rise over the lunar horizon, blue and whole. One evening, as the sun set behind the crater rim, Lena broke the silence. Do you think they'll come back? Kyle didn't answer right away. He watched the stars. Maybe. But next time they'll know we're not just throwing rocks. We're throwing warnings, she nodded. And if someone else comes? Then we'll be ready. They didn't say more. They didn't need to. Far out in the galaxy, word spread. A young species in the Sol system had faced the Cathari, the unstoppable empire, and broken their fleet with simple physics and raw nerve. Other civilizations took notice. Some were afraid. Some were curious. A few sent quiet signals toward Earth, not with weapons but with questions. Humanity had not asked for this war. But by winning it in the most basic way possible, mass, speed, and will, they had changed their place in the cosmos forever. No one called them primitive anymore. Months later, Kyle stood on a beach in Oregon, barefoot in the surf. The ocean was cold, the sky clear. He held a real coffee in a real mug. Lena sat nearby, sketching designs for a new kind of railgun, one that could fire from Mars orbit. They didn't talk about the battle much. But sometimes, when a shooting star crossed the sky, they'd both look up and smile, because they knew what most people didn't. The galaxy was full of empires with fancy shields and glowing weapons. But none of them understood the oldest truth of all. If you hit something hard enough, it breaks. And humanity? Humanity knew how to hit hard. The stars watched. And for the first time, they watched with respect.